Okay, what I'm going to look at now is how to set up the pitch curves on your radio and how that actually affects the angle of attack of the blade in flight. And we're going to also have a look at how I use a pitch gauge just to determine we've got approximately the right angles. The first thing we do is set up a flat pitch curve. And what I've got here in the Futaba is 0 at all 5 points. Now that means the servos are going to be completely neutral and they're not going to move as I move this throttle collective up and down. You can see there's absolutely no movement there. Okay, now that's useful only for one thing, and that is centering your servos using the subtrim. Once you've done that, you don't need the flat pitch curve anymore. Now in this radio I've actually got them all set up because it's got 4 different pitch curves, but if you're using something like a Spectrum DX6 you're just going to have to set the pitch curves manually. The next one you want to set is actually the default idle up, which goes from maximum negative pitch to maximum positive pitch. In the Futaba radio it's minus 100 through to 0 to plus 100. In the Spectrum you're going to have 0, 50 being the center point and 100 being the maximum. What this does, it actually causes the servo to move to its maximum amount. Now what also determines that servo movement is something called the swash setting. And sorry if this looks a little bit clumsy, I'm trying to do 3 things with only 2 hands. But, there we go, did it again. What I'm looking for is the swash setting. You can see there I've got aileron minus 50, elevator minus 50, pitch minus 50. That's what I need to get the right servo movements. This setting here on pitch will determine overall how much your swash plate is going to move. So you can see on the 50 setting, as I move the stick up and down, you can see just how much that swash plate is moving. If I were to reduce that to a very low setting, you can see moving that stick up and down, the swash plate is barely moving. So that is actually going to change the amount of pitch you've got on your blades as well. I'll put it back to a higher setting. Let's say I'll put it up to about 85. Now what's happening is there's lots and lots of movement with small stick movements. Okay, now that's too sensitive. That's going to give me too much pitch. I'll probably get servo binding. I'll probably get some rotor stall. So you've just got to find a nice happy position. Generally for most radios 50% is a good starting point. Okay, so that's going to go from there. Alright, let's go back to our pitch curve. What we're trying to do is we're trying to set up the helicopter so that we have at maximum upstick position about 10 degrees of positive pitch. Okay, now how this pitch gauge works, this is how I use it. I know there's probably a few different ways, but I've found this way works the best. I clip that onto the blade, and what I then do is I align this top part of the pitch gauge with the fly bar behind it. Okay, now what I've got there is I've got the stick in the maximum up position, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to align the top part of that gauge with the fly bar, and I'll just move the camera so you can see what I've done. Okay, hopefully you can see that the top part of the gauge is aligned with the fly bar. And what it's reading there is about 11 degrees positive pitch. Okay, so that's about what you want, 10 or 11 degrees with maximum pitch curve setting. Now if I move that throttle stick all the way down and again align the top of this gauge with the fly bar paddle, so I've done there. Again, it's a bit tricky to do this with just 2 hands. Okay, I've lined that up reasonably well there, and that's showing me about -9 degrees. So I've set it up that way deliberately. Okay, so I've got -9 to +10 degrees of pitch. Now, here's where there's a little bit of personal preference that comes into the equation. You can see where the throttle stick is. It's right in the middle, and what that's going to give me in terms of pitch is, theoretically, it should give you 0 pitch, and in fact that's exactly what it does in this case. Now remember, this is just a setup pitch curve. I'm setting it up purely so that I've got the right amount of positive and negative pitch movement. If you want more or less pitch, you have to adjust that swash setting, the one that was -50. You can either increase it or decrease it, and that will change the maximum amount of pitch available to your helicopter. Now, when you're flying your helicopter, I personally like to have the helicopter hovering with the stick just slightly above the neutral position. It just feels comfortable. When you start to do forward flying, you'll get something called translational lift, and you'll actually have to reduce the collective just slightly, otherwise the helicopter will keep climbing. So I always set up my helicopters so that they're hovering with the stick just slightly above neutral, and then once I start forward flight, I find that bringing it back to the neutral position is just comfortable for normal level forward flight. And yeah, and that's pretty much how I like it. Now, to achieve that, you're going to try and set up a pitch on this blade of about +3 degrees in the neutral position. Okay, remember, +3, +4 degrees was the optimum lift drag ratio. It's going to give us the most efficient hovering. The way we do that is, if I come back to my radio, I'll actually go to my practical pitch curve. Okay, you can see I've got +10 there in the middle position. Now, +10 is actually going to give me just a little bit of positive pitch in that stick neutral position as I move it up to about there. So it's just above the neutral position. Let's measure what the pitch is. Line it up with the flybar, and that's it there. Line it up. This is really tricky, guys, with just 2 hands, but I'll do my best. Okay, that's lined up now, the pitch, top of the pitch gauge with the flybar, and look at that, it's giving me right on 3.5 to 4 degrees. So I know if I've got sufficient rotor RPM of about 28 to 2900, that stick position there is going to give me a hover. What is more is that angle is going to be the optimum lift drag ratio. So hovering at that power setting and at that angle of attack, I'm going to have the most efficient hover possible. You can hover with lower RPM, but you're going to require more angle of attack, which is going to give you more drag, which means your battery is going to be drained faster. You can hover with a lower angle of attack, but then you're going to need lots more rotor RPM. So remember, optimum lift drag ratio is about 3 to 4 degrees on the blade, and it's just how you set up your pitch curve to determine where that occurs. My personal preference is just above the neutral position, so that in forward flight you can bring that stick back to the neutral position. And what I've done also with this pitch curve is I've limited the maximum to +90 and the minimum to -80, and what that does is it just reduces the overall amount of pitch at the extremes. I don't need +12 degrees. I'm not good enough at flying, or certainly 3D aerobatics, to ever require that at this stage and in the foreseeable future. So up to about 9-10 degrees positive pitch and -8 or 9 degrees of pitch is more than adequate for me, and it keeps the helicopter nice and stable also. So hopefully that's given you a bit of an insight into pitch curves and how that affects the setup of your helicopter, and how to use a pitch gauge to try and determine the angle, and hopefully it's given you an understanding of why we want to set about 3 to 4 degrees in the desired stick position. I mean, some people might like to hover with the stick a bit low, a bit high. As I said, I personally like it just above the neutral position, moving it back to the center. So hopefully I didn't confuse anyone. I've had to shoot this video a couple of times because I confused myself, and Anyway, I'll just stick it on the forum now, and hopefully it's beneficial. Thanks for watching.